Hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my channel. Today, we are going to create not one but two cards actually. Um, we will be using the Leaning Lily set by Altenio. Now, this one is the Build a Garden set. So, you get your stamp set, a coordinating die that cuts out the main focal point image, and three big sentiments. And then we also have the layering stencils included in the set. So you also get a blending brush, but we'll be using a different set for our cards today. Now, this video is actually, so we'll be creating these cards today. So this was actually the cards that I created for my AECP workshop on the 18th of July. And I ran into some technical issues and was not able to record the class. So I thought, well, instead of doing like a fast forward video, I would just, you know, go ahead and show you exactly what we did during the class. I don't want to miss out on any of the steps there. Hey, Tamara. Hi. Thank you for joining. And I'm so sorry. In my email, it said 3 p.m. Eastern time, but then I, I, I kind of messed it up. It was actually 3 p.m. Pacific time. So I'm so sorry about that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. And we will be creating these cards. Absolutely easy, not a lot of techniques involved. But the purpose of that workshop on 18th of July was, now whenever I get any set like these, be it the Build a Garden set or the Craft Your Life project kit. Um, hey there. Yes, you're right on time. So we just got started. So okay, so the main aim, whenever I get these subscription kits where there's a lot of products involved, I try to find out ways to get the most out of it. I don't like stamping it once and then just putting back in my stash. I just like to have different ways of how I can use it. So here's like two cards where I created. One is, both are clean and simple. It's not a lot of techniques that are involved. But in this one, in this case, we are stamping it directly onto our panel, and there's no die cutting involved, just the stamped image and the stenciling. Here we, and this is a lot bright and clean and crisp image kind of a design. And for this one, I actually die cut the image and I was going in for a little moody, vintagey vibe. And here I have that bright pink. So that's the difference that we have in both these cards. And the choice of colors will be a little different depending on the mood that we are going for. If I want like a bright pop of color, I'll go for a bright pink, red, purple, and a brighter shade of green. But if I'm going for a more moody, vintagey look, I'll go for those rustic oranges or browns, and the greens that I used here is the Mediterranean glow. So that is a very subtle green that I used here. Other than that, the techniques will all remain the same. We have some splattering uh, that's going on in the background, and very subtle splattering. And also, this one is die cut. So I'll be layering up the die cuts. For this card, if I personally prefer stamping and doing all the work on my panel instead of a card base, instead of directly on the card base. Hey there. Wow, Dallas. Okay, that's that's evening, right? What time is it in Dallas? Is it 3 hours or 2 hours away from the Pacific time? I am still like groggy with the time zone, so I'm so sorry about the that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Um, and well, coming back to this one, so if you want, you could directly stamp it on your card base and then just because this is almost like a single layer card, you're not die cutting anything. There's no pop of dimension. But hi Irene, thanks for joining. But if you wanted, you could definitely stamp it onto the card base directly, and you don't need to pop it up on a panel like I did. Again, the same thing with this one also. You could do the ink blending directly on your card base, but I always like to pop up my card panels onto the card base. So these are the two panels that we will be working on today. Okay. Now, before I get started, I also wanted to show you guys that all of the stamping that I do, now I've already stamped the image just to save us some time with the stamping and the die cutting. Oh, Dallas is central. Um, oh, we also have had a really hot week, not as much as 104, 105, but then, yeah, it was, I think, in the 80s. That's pretty hot for Seattle, I must say. Okay, so this image I stamped using a pigment ink. So I used the obsidian black pigment ink and I used clear embossing powder to set the image. So this panel is what we'll be working on this one. Okay, so I stamped my image using pigment ink and I used heat embossing powder and heat set this because I always like that glossy shine finish on my cards. Now, since we are ink blending, and if you don't like using the embossing powder, you can definitely stamp this, but not using a pigment ink. I would suggest using a dye ink. So, something like this. So, this is a dye ink, so that won't, smudge your blending. But I usually prefer using pigment ink and then embossing my image because that I feel gives a little more brighter pop to my cards. Uh, so, all right, let's get started. So this is panel number one, which is what I'll be using for this one. I also went ahead and so if you guys don't have this particular stamp set, you're free to use any floral stamp set. The main idea being I want a little bit of free space around my image. So both these images, even though we have colored the image, I still have a little free space around the image. So that is like a little white around my image. So whatever stamp set you're using, whatever florals you're using, just make sure you stamp it on either corner of your panel. So for me, it's the right corner and it's going towards the left. Now, if you have a flower that is facing the other direction, like say, for example, I'll just use this set itself. So this is my flower. Now, if your flower is the other way around, I would suggest, placing it diagonally. So whatever flower you're using, just place it diagonally. If you want it like upside down, again, make sure the flower runs diagonally through the paper. So that kind of gives a beautiful visual appearance on top. Okay, so that is what I did here as well. Now this panel is your A2 size panel, a standard card front. I did go ahead and trim this one down, so that is why it looks a lot smaller. Now, if I were to compare this on a card front, card base, sorry, just pull out a card base for you guys. So this one, say if I were to pop it up, so I get a big border around my card panel. So, and this one again is slightly smaller. So this one measures 4 by 5 1/4. This one measures 3 3/4 by 5 inch. So this is a lot smaller than this one. So again, that totally depends on how you like your card fronts to be framed on your card base. And this panel is the exact size of your card base. So this is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. We will be coloring this in and then later on trimming it down. So that was card number one. Now for this one, I wanted a die cut piece. So what I do is I have die cut my flower already. Now, whenever I am stamping or ink blending, or even coloring an image, if I know I'm going to die cut it, I will first die cut before adding in any color. Even if I'm doing an alcohol marker coloring or ink blending or watercoloring, I first like to die cut the images just because in case like after I have colored in all of that image, once I'm running it through the die cutting machine, if the die shifts, I don't want to ruin my image. So this is just a personal choice. So I usually like to have my die cut image ready before I go ahead and do any coloring or, just make a final product ready. Now this one we are not die cutting, so it stays on my cut panel. This one I did. Now I also went ahead and cut out a few extra pieces. Now I cut out an extra piece of the same die cut just to layer this before we stick it on our panel. That gives it a little more sturdiness. Now this is a totally optional step. You don't need this. You could just use foam tape and directly adhere it onto your card panel. But for me, even if I'm using foam tape, I always like to double up on my die cuts. That's because it just gives it a little more sturdy finish. And I also went ahead and die cut two sentiments for each of those cards. This one says, "May each day bring you new strength." And this one says, "Wishing you comfort and calm." So I also went ahead and cut these sentiment strips again using plain white cardstock. You could definitely use foam tape to pop it up, but I prefer adding a little bit of extra layering to my sentiments, and especially the sentiments that are thin like these. I generally don't prefer popping it up using foam tape. I feel like adding extra layer gives a more polished and clean look. Yeah, I have had that. I have had that done several times. So I would just color in my image and like make it look really pretty. And then when I die cut it, the die would just move. And I was like, okay, this is not done. So that's when now it's a habit. Like, I just stamp, die cut, and then color in. So I am rest assured, like, I don't have to worry about any of the dies moving around and ruining my image. Okay, so we will get started with this card first. Let me just pick up the colors real quick. Okay. Now for this card, I'm using all these mini ink cubes for all of the coloring today. For this particular design, I used the Bubblegum Dreams Fresh Dye ink. So we have four colors here, and I used all four on these. Now we'll stay to just one color palette for this particular set. And for the greens, I used the Whispering Woodland green because this is the brightest set of green that I have in my stash. Another set of green that I have is the Mediterranean Glow set, this one, which is what I used on this card. So this is a set that I feel gives me a more vintagey look. Hey Liz. Hi, thanks for joining. And this one for me is like those brighter greens. So this is what we will achieve on this one. Okay. And for this particular flower, I used a mix of colors actually. So I have Tropical Tango, and then I mixed some colors from the Carnival Magic as well, the darker tones. And I also used a hint of Desert Dreams. So for me, since I wanted to create more of that vintagey look, I went in experimenting with the colors that I wanted. So for me, I initially thought of using the Mandarin Burst and Tangerine Dreams, which are these bright shades of oranges, but I felt they were too bright for that vintage vibe. So that's when I came in with a little bit of brown, which is cocoa cream. So, and for the very centers, I went ahead and used cherry sweet over the brown. That gave it more of a deeper look. But, well, definitely you don't have to use all these colors. You could just bring in a couple of shades of browns and maybe one or two shades of oranges, or just stick with brown. So that'll give you more of that vintage vibe. Okay. So let's get started with card number one first, which is this bright, clean and simple card. Now, since I've already used pink on this one, let me show you how this looks with a purple lavender shade. So this one, I'm using shades of purple. Now, in the description box below, I have linked just the stamp set because I was not sure of what colors I'll be using. So once I'm done with the entire video, I'll make sure to list all these colors down. Okay, so let's get started with this one. I will bring this panel onto my ultra sticky mat. Another choice of bright colors that I would like to use is these beautiful blues. This one is Marine Light set. This is another bright and vibrant set that I feel would be beautiful for this particular set. Okay, So that's that. And then let me now bring out my stencils. Now here we have 4 stencils. I will start with stencil number 1. Now stencil number 1 and 2 have the flowers. But if you see, it's an open flower, like you don't have additional stencils to layer them. So this again is like an open petal. So you don't have additional layers to, add those beautiful layers. You could definitely go ahead and use your alcohol markers to add those beautiful shines and shadows, but we will be doing that with our blending brushes itself. We'll not be using any alcohol markers today. So let me just line this up and we can get started there. Now, since this is our main card panel, like I'm not going to cut this out, I'll be very careful not to get ink on any of the open areas. So for that, what I like to do, you could definitely use some masking tape, but what I find is the easiest is to use some post-it notes. So I just have a couple of these handy, and then I'll just mask off any of those edges so that I don't accidentally get ink there. Now, even though I know I'll be try as much as possible to stay away from this part, but still, just to make sure, I'll just cover that one also. Here I have. Okay. Now we will be starting with, let's keep these aside. We'll be starting with, I'll be using all 4 colors. So I'll be starting with the soft lilac, which is the lightest shade of purple that I have. For all of our ink blending today, I'm using these small blending brushes. You could also use the detailed ones, but for me, this one works fine. So I will start with the purples, and so I usually have 2 brushes in each color family, one which I use for the lighter tones and the second one which I use for the 2 darker tones. So I will start with soft lilac. Now how I do this is pick up some color on my brush and then just dab it on the stencil, not on the image itself or the open area. I just dab it on my stencil and very gently in circular motions, just add that ink. The ink has to be as light as possible. I'm not adding a lot of color here. And for all this, I am trying to have the concentration of color just to the center of the flower. So if you see the tip of the petals, they are a lot lighter, or even you could even leave it white. But I'll focus all the colors, all 4 colors, to the center of the petal rather than bringing it to the extreme edges. So whatever color I have in my on my blending brush, I'll just blend it around the edge or the center of the flower and then just lightly pull it towards the tip of each of those petals. I'll do the same for all my petals. So this is one of those techniques where you use just one family of colors that you have. You're not mixing the colors. And then here on this stencil, this little part is very delicate. So I just like to hold it with my finger, or you could use those uh, piercing tools or anything that can hold it down. You don't want that to break. So that's it. Just peel off that stencil and show you guys. So that's what it looks like right now. So I have more of that color concentrated on the center rather than on the tips. So my tips are almost as light as they can be, and then I have more concentration of color on the center. Okay. Now the same stencil, I will put it back actually, and then we'll work on all our layers together. Now, since we are using the same color family and going from light to dark, we don't have to clean stencils. But if I'm using like different colors, I'll show you in the next card where we'll be using multiple colors. I do like to clean up my stencil because I don't like my blending brushes getting contaminated. Okay, so that was soft lilac. Now we move on to lavender fields, which is the second shade. Okay, so again, I'm doing the same exact thing, picking up color and just focusing on the center of the flower. So that is color number two. So with soft lilac, I may have added color slightly, maybe not till the tips, but very lightly till at least three-fourths of the flower. Now with the lavender fields, which was the second color, I went maybe a little lower than that. So basically, I'm just trying to get an ombre gradient. So I'm not going as far as I went with the soft lilac. So that was layer number two. Now I have deep iris, which is the third color. For this one, I'll switch my ink blending brush. I have the light and the dark, so I'll take the darker one. And then again, try to stay as much as possible to the center of the petals. That's it. And then with the midnight violet, if you wanted, you could use the same exact brush. Or if you wanted a more detailed coloring, I use these micro blending brushes or the detailed blending brushes. So what I do is now with this brush, instead of going in circular motion, since this is like an angled brush, I just like to pull the color from the center to the outer portions of the petal. So I'm just pulling the color instead of going in circular motions. And I'm sticking to the base as much as possible. I am not pulling the color out. So again, I will do the same for all the petals. There we go. There's a little slight opening there. And that's it. So that is layer number one, which gives that beautiful transition from the darker to the lightest area. So you'll see our flower center is super dark. Now the same stencil has this particular opening that is for the rest of the petals. So here we go. I'll just line that up. And before I go ahead and start coloring, I will just mask off any of that open areas. I know it's too far from the stencil, but still I will just cover it up because I don't want any of that, inky boo-boos on my panel. Okay, I will repeat the same exact thing again. I am starting with soft lilac. Now with the soft lilac, I will start from the center and gradually move to the tip of the petal, making sure the tip stays as light as possible. There we go. That was color number one. Now color number two is lavender fields. Again, I'll bring the color just to the center and fade it out to the tip of the petal. Then for the third color, which is deep iris. Now this one as center as possible. I'm not even trying to get to half of the petal. So I'll just stay close to the center as I can. So and my last color is Midnight Violet, which is the darkest shade in the set. And I'm taking my detail blending brush, and again, just in flickering motions. I'm not going in circular motions. I'm just adding that rich purple at the base. So that's our flower with the first stencil. Now let's move on to, before we move on to stencil number two, what I will do is I'll just go ahead and clean my stencil because we'll be using this for our second card. And this way it's a lot more quicker. What I like to do is put down a little microfiber cloth here, spray the stencil with some water, and take another microfiber cloth and just take out all that color. Just be careful with these tiny little areas. You don't want to pull those out. And your stencil is clean in no time. Unless I'm using any pastes or any stencil butter or those kind of things, I usually just clean my stencil as I go. I don't take it to the sink and like wash it under running water. Okay. Now I'll bring back the panel and we will move on to stencil number two, which is remaining of the flower. So here we go. Again, let me just pull out my. Now this particular image is the image of the flower that we colored earlier. These are little buds. Now there is another way that I like to do that. It's the same actually basically, but then I'll just show you how I do it. Okay, I'll start with soft lilac again. And just like we did with the rest, I'll start with this big petal. Now again with these buds, I keep the technique similar. I will start with the soft lilac, and this time instead of like trying to keep the tip absolutely bright white, I will blend in the soft lilac to the entire open area. Let's make sure I have some tape. So these buds will be a little darker than the actual flower itself. There. Next, I'm bringing in lavender fields. For my main petal, I will keep it as I did for the first layer. Now with this one, I will add the lavender fields again to the base and fading it out as we go. But this time, it will be a lot more towards the tip as compared to what we did with our petal, the main flower petals. So right there. Moving on to color number three, which is deep iris. This one again, I will add more of the color and just spread it out to the tip. And for my last midnight violet, what I'm going to do is bring in my detailed blending brush and add color to the base of this big petal. Again, I'm just pulling the color out. I'm not doing any circular motions here. Okay. For this one, for this the buds, I will just stick to the base. And again, without any circular motions, I'm just flickering that color. Just like that, we are done. There we go. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? I love how bright it is. Now, these colors will definitely tone down a bit. It won't stay as bright as you see here. It will tone down once it, like, settles in on the paper. Now, for the last layer, I have these openings which will go in the center of our flower. I will just panel. Now for this one, I'm using the darkest shade of purple or whatever dark color family you've chosen. Take the darkest shade and add that. So again, I am using my detail brush and blending in color. You could also, if you wanted to make it a lot quicker, you could just use your bigger brush and add in color. So that's your flower. Okay. Now again, before I move on to the next stencil, I'll just wipe this one down. And this is just plain water that I'm adding. So it will clear out easily. Now, cleaning out your stencils as you go is really helpful, especially when you're creating multiple cards at once, like how we're doing now. Otherwise, you could just leave it and then, put it on your sink and then wash it later on as you get time. Okay, now this is stencil number 3, which we'll be using to color in our leaves. So for my leaves, I am bringing in these beautiful greens. So these are the darker shades of greens or the brighter shades of greens that I have. This is a Whispering Woodland. From this, I'm going to use just the two darker shades. I won't be using the lighter ones. So I'm using Fresh Leaf and Reindeer Moss. Okay. I will just cover this part right there. And a little opening here. Okay. So I will start with Fresh Leaf and add color all over the leaf. This time, no, like, not that ombre building. I'm just adding color all over the leaf. But at some point, what I'm going to do is now, say here, I'm adding more pressure as compared to here. So, pressure or the intensity of color that I'm laying down really depends on, like, how I want to see the color. Some days I just want the entire thing to be really dark green. Some days I feel, okay, let's just make it like, or have a little splotchy look on the greens. So that's how I usually color in my greens. I don't apply the same amount of pressure on all the areas. So that was Fresh Leaf. Now, before I take out the stencil, I will come with Reindeer Moss. Now, this one, I'm not adding all over the leaf. I will just add it to the some selected areas to give that beautiful dark, difference. So that gives a beautiful dimension or shading effect to your greens. So this does not have to be as perfect as how we colored in our flowers. You could add it in anyhow, any way you want, just to get that beautiful shading or the difference between the light and the dark greens. Okay, I'll just show you what I mean. So So if you take a closer look, I have that dark reindeer moss and then a little lighter, and here as well I have some dark tones and then light tones. So it's more like how I am feeling at the moment. That's how I color my greens in. But with my flowers, I tend to be a little more specific of how the ombre detailing goes out. Now, before bringing in the fourth stencil, I'll just clean this one. All right. That's it. And then this is the fourth and final layer, which again has two parts. One is the stem and the other one is these little, one is the leaf. The first one is the remainder of the leaves and the second one is for the stems. So I will start with this little guy here. I'm repeating the same fresh leaf and reindeer moss for these as well. Don't forget to cover all these little openings. You don't want color on any other part other than the open images on the stencil. Okay, again, I'm going to start with fresh leaf. And then reindeer moss. All I have to do is just lift the stencil and move it a little on top so that I can line it up with the remaining of the stems. Now, even though I have a lot of gap here, I just cover it in just in case I mess it up or, I don't want any of that extra color on my panel. And that is something I don't have to worry for my second image, which is already die cut. So that's another advantage of having a die cut image before coloring in. You don't have to worry about like ink getting on places where you don't want. All right. So, well, that is our flower for card number one. I love how beautiful that color looks. It's a little different than the pink that we used here, but I feel it's absolutely stunning. I love the purple. Okay. Now I will set this panel aside and we will work on our second card. Where did I keep it? Let me just clean the stencil first and then I will go ahead and we can start with our flower number two. So this is the color that we are going to do on flower number 2. This is a lot more moody and a little vintagey, so I'm using some not so bright colors. I'll use some dull color combinations. Well, none of the colors are dull, but then we will make them look a little dull. So that was card number 1. I'll set this aside for now, and then we will move on to the uh, creating the splatters and all of that a little later. First, we'll work on this one. Okay, so for that, I will use some browns, a little bit of the orange, and yellow. So we have yellow, and for my greens, I have this color family, which is Mediterranean Glow. I'll show you how I achieve that little bit of moody tone using these bright colors. Okay. So now that our image is already die cut, we have no masking required. So we can directly jump into the coloring. Okay. Let me first set all the blending brushes aside. Bring out my stencil number 1, which is that beautiful petals, which will create these beautiful petals. All right. Now, for if you see the actual image, you will see I have the slightest bit of yellow on the edges. Now, if you want, you could skip this step and keep the edges white, but since we are getting into that vintagey tone, I want a slightest bit of yellow on the edges. Now, for that, what I'm going to do is I am using the Citrus Punch set. From this, I'll start with mid yellow. You could also use lemonade stand, but I prefer using mid yellow because once we blend in the oranges, it will tone down a bit. So I'm using a brighter yellow. So now here, what I'm going to do is pick up yellow and just on the tip of the petals. It's okay if you pull that in. It's the other colors, the browns and the oranges will hide that, but I just chose to stay towards the tip. It won't really matter if you bring it in. This one is a little, I'll just be a little extra careful with this tiny little stencil piece that is hanging out. I don't want to break that. I'm just going to hold it while I add my color. So I'll just pop out the stencil and show you how I've colored this. Here you'll see I have not brought in or pulled the yellow to the center. I'm just leaving it there. Okay, now I start with yellow because now next colors will be those bright oranges and browns. So I don't want my blending brush to get contaminated. So that's the reason I start with the lightest tone. Now, if you also plan on doing like these multicolored shadings, always try to start with the lightest shade that you have in your stash so that you don't contaminate your blending brushes. Now here, I'll just bring the microfiber cloth and clean that ink. I don't have to be like, thoroughly cleaning the stencil. I can just pull out the color so that I don't contaminate my blending brush. Okay. Next, I'm going to bring in Mandarin Burst, which is the second orange in Tropical Tango set. So I have Mandarin Burst here. Now, the technique of using these colors again remains same, like how we did with our purple flower. I will start adding color from the center to the tip of the petal, making sure I don't cover the yellow entirely. So there I will start from the center and just pull the color outward. Now, this bright yellow and orange combination is something that I absolutely love. But then again, this becomes more similar to the card that we just created with that bright tones, which is not something that I'm looking for. You could definitely leave it as is, add those brighter oranges. You could add the tangerine dream to make it a lot more brighter. But then we are going in for that vintage mood. So that's the reason I'll be adding some browns to this. Okay. Now, instead of using the Tangerine Dream, which is the second shade of orange, I will go with Red Jasper, which is more of that brownish shade. So I will use my ink blending brush and just bring in that brown and try to cover whatever portion that was covered with the mandarin burst. That will kind of tone down that bright orange. Hey Jen, hi, thank you for joining. Uh, yeah, I will have the recap once the live is done, so you can watch that later. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. So yeah, I will bring the red jasper to almost the entire part of the petal where I added this bright orange mandarin burst. So we are just trying to tone down the bright colors here. So that's it. Yeah. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in two browns. So we have cocoa cream and choco hazelnut. So again, with my brown brush, here I will try to stick to the very center of the flower. I am not going into the tips. This is just like we did with the three layers of the purples. And finally, I have the darkest shade of brown. Now here I'll show you how I use the same blending brush. I'm not using the detail. If you don't have the detail or the smaller blending brushes, you can use the same one, but just stick to the very center. Like, try as much as possible not to move towards the tip of the flower. So there we have it. So you'll see it's not exactly the same set of colors. I did use a different set because in this one, instead of the oranges, I added rhodolite, which is this beautiful shade of really bright mauve from Carnival Magic. I absolutely love this shade, and that is what we added on the center. And then after that, I again added some chocolate cream just to lighten that up. So for this project, I'm not using this set. So it'll look a little different than what it is on this one. Okay, now again, I will bring back stencil number one, and we'll do the same exact thing with the remaining of the flower. Okay. So we will start with mid yellow, just to the petals, tip of the petals, sorry. There you go. Just clean off that stencil. And then we have the mandarin burst from the center to the tip. Make sure not to cover the yellows entirely. We still need to see the yellow. So I'll show you the difference between that bright orange and how we turned the bright orange into those beautiful subtle browns here. That's how you can get a vintagey look even using those bright colors. Oh, thank you so much, Jen. I had a lot of fun using the set, and I have created so many cards using the set. I really can't get enough of it. All right. Moving on to stencil number two, which is this big petal here and the little bud. Okay. Again for this, oh, sorry. I actually didn't finish this. Just realized it now. Okay. So we will place the stencil back, and then again we will do red jasper first, followed by cocoa cream and choco hazelnut. Yes, I love the sticky mat because it makes my work so much more easier. Everything stays in place and I don't have to, like, stick washi tape or have tape down just to make sure everything stays in place. Whoever thought of creating this product is an absolute genius, I feel. So that was red jasper. Now I have cocoa cream, which is the lighter of the two browns that I have. I will bring it to the base, and then with the lightest hint of choco hazelnut, I will add just to the center of the flower. If you don't have like a really dark brown, you could also use black or a dark gray. Oh yes, I too have the 9 by 12. It's a beautiful, like, I love the stick on these mats. And I think the other one I have is the one by Simon, and that also is absolutely amazing. So for the Simon mat, I have not removed the backing. So now this one stays in place, the sticky mat stays in place, but then the other mat, I just like to keep the packaging around so that I can, like, move it around while I'm planning, especially if I'm doing a big panel. Now for this one, I need this to stay in place, so that's the reason I'm using this mat, so it just stays in place and does not move around. Okay, so we will now move on to the stencil number two, which will give you the big petal and those little buds there. So again, starting with mid yellow, this time this is the tip of our leaf. So just be mindful of that. Now, if you see, I have some yellow on the bud also. I'm okay, not worried about that. I will just add yellow to the tips of the buds. A little bit of color going on the buds or on the sides of the flowers where we don't need it, I am totally fine with that. But if you don't like having that mix of color, you could just put a little post-it note or a washi tape to cover that. And the best part is these mats are really easy to clean, so I just spritz it with some water and it's good to go. And if it's like really bad, I'll just use some soap and hot water and it's clean. But most of the time, just a spritz of water and microfiber cloth does the trick. Okay, now I'm going with my orange and doing the same exact thing for the petal and the little buds. So that was orange. Now I will go with red jasper, which is that beautiful shade of brown. And then we have choco cream and sorry, cocoa cream and choco hazelnut. And for this one, I'm just sticking to the very base of these buds. I'm not going in like to the center. There we go. So I love how moody that looks. Now we have this layer. For this card, I used raw amber, which was the darkest in the yellows that I had. But here, you could literally use any of these colors. So you could either use those dark browns, or you could, again, like in this card, I stuck with the yellow. You could really use any color. Let's just do how we did for this one. We used the darkest shade of purple we had. So let's just use the darkest shade of brown here, which is Choco Hazelnut. Okay, I have said hazelnut so many times now. I really feel like having something with hazelnut spread or something of that sort. Let's just add this center. All right. That's our flower. And now we'll do the leaves. So this looks slightly different than what we did here because I chose different colors, but the idea is the same. Okay, my husband comes with hazelnut latte or hazelnut chocolate. I think I will go with hazelnut latte. But it's too hot, so maybe a cold. Okay, now I shouldn't be talking about lattes and mochas because then I'll really want to have some. So let's just change our color palette and move on to the Mediterranean glow. We are done with the browns and the hazelnut and the chocolates. Okay, where did I keep the Mediterranean glow? Let me just make sure all my ink pads are closed. Okay. Now for the Mediterranean glow, I am using olive and sugar kelp. Now these are again the darker greens. Now in the previous one, I had reindeer moss and so I had fresh leaf and reindeer moss, which was the darker greens from the Whispering Woodland set. From the Mediterranean glow, I'm using olive and sugar kelp. Now this time I'm not cleaning the stencil as I go because this is the last card that I'm going to create, so I'm fine with that. Looking for my blending brush. Again, I'll start with olive and just randomly add color all over the background. All over the leaves, I'm sorry. And in certain areas, I'm adding slightly more pressure so that I get that difference or variation in the inks. And then I will bring in sugar kelp. I just want that slight transition and variation in color. That is stencil number 3. For the fourth and final stencil, we will do part 1, which is the leaves. Don't miss this little guy here. We have Olaf. And also don't miss these openings right here. Now you could definitely add some glitter paste or those kind of things for these little openings. Then I'm just keeping it simple. Perfect. The last layer for our flowers. Now, for those who weren't able to attend the class, this was the exact same thing that we did. And I created the same colors, the pinks and this one. So this is exactly what we created for the class. I'm just using some different colors here because I already have, say, 4 set of the same color. So I didn't want to create the same exact thing again. But the idea that we share during class is exactly the same. There we go. So we are done with our flower. I will hold on to olive and sugar kelp. We are not yet done with these colors, but I have set all the other colors aside. And these are our flowers. One is really bright and vibrant, and this one is that little moody, vintagey, but we've used a bright yellow and bright orange on this one. Nobody will know that. Like, we have used browns to just tone down all that bright orange. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, before I move ahead, we will create our background. Now for this one, I am taking a panel that measures 4 by 5 1/4 inches. If you see this one, this is your standard A2 size card base. This is a 1/4 inch smaller. So this is 4 by 4 by 5 1/4 inch. This is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch. Now this one, what I'm going to do is add color. Now my flower is going this way, so my color will be on the opposite direction. If your flower is from left to right, make sure your color comes in from here. So whichever orientation your flower is, make sure you ink blend on the opposite side. So I am bringing, or I'll start with olive. I'm using the same blending brush. You could definitely use the bigger ones, but I'll be using this small one itself. So basically, you could use the same exact blending brush for your flowers, the detail sections on your flowers, and even cover an entire background. And well, I will not pull the color till the very edge. I will, try to tone it down midway. So we get that beautiful transition of, like, we have white, then that light green, and then as we move to the edge, we will be adding sugar kelp, which will give you that dark blend. So I will start with olive. And usually for color blending, I don't like to use my ultra sticky mat because, the glass mat or the work surface makes it a lot more easier. If you do not have a glass mat, another thing you can do is just put your panel on a scrap piece of printer paper and just pull the color in. So that also makes coloring a lot more easy, or ink blending on panels a lot more easier. So I will just bring in all of that color. It's okay if the color is a little bit splotchy, especially with these smaller ink blending brushes as compared to if you're using a larger one, because we definitely want that splotchy look. I want a little bit of that, uh, textured look. I will just bring in color and add it to the center, like that. I'm just going diagonal with my color. I will bring back my piece just to make sure I have enough to cover the diagonal. So I will place my, say, flower here. So I want roughly till this part. So I'll bring the color a little more down. Go. If you want a very clean color without any splotches, definitely go in for the bigger blending brush. But I am actually looking for those imperfections. Like if you take a closer look, it's not very perfect. You see some cloudy marks here, some brush marks. I'm totally happy with that. That's exactly the look that I'm going for. So there we go. I will bring back my flower and see if I'm happy with the color transition, and it looks good. Maybe a little more down. Next, I will bring in sugar kelp, and this time I will not bring it as much down as I did with this one. I'll just stick to the edges. So, right there. That's it. It does look a little bit grainy right now, but then once the color settles into the paper, it look good. If you wanted, you could also use a little bit of brown just to deepen this particular corner, but I will skip the brown. And I'll just place my flower back just to make sure I have got a beautiful rich color there, maybe a little more. Okay, that's good. Before I place my panels, I'll just make sure my surface is nice and clean. All right, so that's going to be our panel for this particular card. Now, on both our cards, we have splatters. So before moving ahead and before adhering things down, I will do the splattering. So you could use your watercolors for the splatters. I am using the sprays, the ink sprays by Altenew. So I have black and gold splatters. So we have the jet black and the antique gold. So we'll be using both of these. Now, before I do that, I'll just move my ink brushes aside. I don't want any splatter on my ink brushes. So, so there are a few things in my splatter box right now. So I'll just do. What I'm gonna do is I'll bring back my microfiber cloth. So if you don't have a splatter box, it's fine. I usually use any packaging box or the Altenew whenever I have some shopping done, and if it comes in a big box, that's what I use. So I will place this panel right here and this one here, and we will first start with our jet blacking. You could definitely use watercolors for this as well. So just make sure it's really uh, mixed. You've mixed in the pigment. And then now that I know my flower goes in this direction, so my splatter also goes in this direction. So let me show with this panel because that'll be a lot more visible. So I know that my flower is in this direction. So my splatters also go here. That's how I usually like to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to spray it. I'm just going to lift the nozzle, just take out some of that ink and very lightly tap. So it's okay. The splatters are not supposed to be perfect. Some will be big, some are small. You may go as much as or as little as you want, but I'm just trying to splatter in this direction and I'm gently tapping the nozzle. So all of that falls down there. So this is how my splatter looks. So when I place my flower over it, the flower will cover the splatters, but if you see in the background, you definitely see the splatters. Okay. I will then bring in this panel and do the same exact thing. Now here I'm adding splatters to my flower as well. I'm totally fine with that, but if you don't like it, you can just place, say, a mask, a temporary mask over it, and then splatter around it. Wow, 93 is hot. Okay, so I'm doing the same exact thing for this one as well. Now, since I actually, removed a lot of color, that's why my splatters are way tinier as compared to this panel. I'm just going to tap it very lightly. That should be it. A little more here. So that's it with my. Next, I'm going with antique gold. Okay. It's. I'm so glad you were able to join. Okay. So with the antique gold, I'm going to do the same exact thing like I did with my black splatters. I'm just going to lift a little bit of that color on my nozzle and then gently tap. That was panel number one, and again for panel number two, I'm going to repeat the same thing. Just remember to clean the nozzle, especially with the pigments that get settled. I usually like to clean it so that your nozzles don't get clogged there. I will close that. We will let this dry while we work on our sentiment strips. Set these aside. Now we'll work on our sentiment strips while those are drying. Sentiment strips and the focal point. So I have this little guy here. I will just glue all these pieces together, so that'll give some time for the splatters to dry. Now this is a step you could definitely skip. You don't have to do this, but then I feel it gives the image a lot more polished look. I mean, you don't see that here on camera, but then in person it looks really good. It looks a lot more finished. So it's not a lot of dimension, it just makes the image a lot more sturdy. So for my main focal point image, I'm just using one layer, but for my sentiments, I usually stack up three layers. So we have one, two, and three for each of these. I'll just add glue on each of this. You could definitely cut it out using those foam sheets or even use foam tape to just add dimension, but this, especially if the sentiment is as delicate as this one, I definitely like to layer it up. And for these, I just use my leftover panels that I have. I don't use a new cardstock for this. If I have any waste card panel or something, from a previous project, I have a little scrap stash. So I use it from there. Scrap station, I can say. So I'll do the same with this one also. So our sentiment is ready, our focal point is ready, and I'm hoping by now our panel also has dried. This looks good. Now we can just go ahead and place this onto our panel. You could definitely pop it up using some foam tape or just place it directly because you've added that extra layer of cardstock. It's okay even if you don't pop it up, but I like to use these very tiny foam squares. This does not give a lot of dimension, but enough to just make it slightly pop on your panel. So there I will just add little pieces. Usually my lives are not this long. It's like maybe 45 minutes or less than an hour, but this is, yeah, we are doing what we did in class, so that's the reason it's taking so long. But then I really had to, like, show all the different techniques that I did during the class, except for the stamping of the image and die cutting. Um, so there we have it. I just, and we can stick this directly onto our card. If you want, you could definitely use some liquid glue to make sure you get that wiggle room, but then this is pretty straightforward. I'll just add it here, and I have a little overhanging edge. I'll just trim that off with my scissor. There you go. And then I will go ahead and add my sentiment. Now, for my sentiment, there are two ways I like to do it. I usually like to have it overlapping with my panel or my background and my focal point image. Mm, I'm sorry if you hear my little one crying. He's taking a nap, so I think he just woke up. But yeah, so for this one, I either like to have it on both my sentiment, my background, as well as my focal point. Like, I very rarely would place a sentiment on top or the bottom of my focal point image. I usually like to overlap it with the background and the focal point. So, like this one. So, we see here my sentiments are overlapping both the background and the image. So, here I will try to overlap this between So here, since I have added foam tape, there's a little lift. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add the slightest bit of foam in the center right here. I know that is where it's going to pop. And then remaining, I will add some glue. I like to go live on this time of the day because this is his nap time and he'll be asleep, and I can make sure none of you hear him cry or scream around the house. This is really a good time. So there we go. Sure, that's nice. Snug there. That is panel number one. You could definitely use some sequences, but I don't think I will. I'll leave it as is. So that is our panel number one. It has that beautiful dimension on it. Now for panel number two, I will be trimming this down. So I will bring my paper trimmer and we will trim this panel down. I want more of that white area to be seen on the diagonally opposite side. So what I'm going to do is I am going to trim this down to, let's see, I really don't like this overhanging edge, so I will trim it down even further to 5 by, and then I will here. So this measures 4 1/4. I will try 4 here. And maybe a 1/4 inch on this side. If not full quarter, a little bit. And just trim this off. Okay. So there. So this panel is a lot smaller than my 4 by 5 1/4 inch. So again, here we don't need any foam tape. We already have a lot of dimension on this one. I'm just going to add some liquid glue to the back of this. Make sure it's perfectly straight on my panel. There you go. All we have to do is adhere this onto card bases. So these are our two panels that we created, and these were the panels that we created for the class. Now this one almost looks very similar with just a little bit of color difference, but this is how a bright and vibrant card would look. You could definitely use blues, reds, even yellow. A bright yellow would look really good on this one. But yeah, we get two different looks, one with one stamp set. You can definitely stamp it directly onto your card base, or we did here, cut it out on a panel and then add it onto your card base. And you get two different looks from the same exact set. So this is basically making the most out of your supplies. This is exactly what I would do with any build your garden set or any craft your life project kit or any card kit that I receive. So this is the card that we've created, and I absolutely love how they turned out. I will definitely have the replay link uploaded or on my Facebook, and I'll just upload all the images on my Instagram, and then you can check it out there. And also, I will be sure to link all the colors and all the supplies that I used in the description box below. All of those links are affiliate links, and like if you shop using my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Before you guys leave, I just wanted to make sure. So, this was the ACP class that was on the 18th of June. I do record my classes, but this one I had some technical difficulties. That's why I couldn't, and I just thought I'll go live. So, my next classes are these two. So, this one is on next Saturday, which is August 1st. This is actually a gatefold card using the Arabesque medallion set. Again, we have stamping, embossing, stenciling all in one. So this is a gatefold card. So we will be creating a beautiful band using vellum, and we will be heat embossing on vellum. And then we have a gatefold. So we have that big die that we will be cutting, die cutting, and then trimming into half to create our gate. And then we have this beautiful card front with a little message wishing you a day filled with all the joy you deserve, which I thought goes perfectly with the celebrate. And then you can open the card and you have enough space to write your message. So that's on August 1st. And this one is on the 15th of August. This is a window shaker card with a floral element. So this is again a very clean and simple card design. Now you could use any shape for the window and any flower that you have in your stash. You could keep the window clear and open, but I use the mosaic. I don't remember the name, but then this is a very intricate die, which was I think in the May release. So again, this both of these are by Alteneu. So this class is on August 1st, and this one is on August 15th, Saturday. So I will have links to all of that also in the description box below. Also, if you want, you could check out my Instagram profile. You can also have links to all of these classes and the supplies listed there as well. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. And I will see you again in my next live, hopefully next Sunday. And bye. Thank you.